Hi, Drew. I am really glad that you left this question/comment because it allows me to talk about the guilt that I feel as an environmental artist and educator because almost all of the art that I make involves some kind of plastic. And that was really hard for me to realize. So, we are going to talk about resin and the kind of resin that I use and why I use resin, but I wanted to point out some other art that I've made in the past. This is mostly paper and also reclaimed plywood. Cool, right? It's also filled with plastic because it is put together with hot glue, and hot glue is plastic. This is a smaller version with fabric and yarn that I made, and it is fabric, right? And then these little beads are made out of reclaimed wires and I think straws and soda bottles. But also, all of that yarn, it is reclaimed, but it's also acrylic. So every time I cut it, little acrylic fibers drop off. And that is actually one of, like clothing fiber is one of the biggest sources of microplastics. So, like, the very act of cutting this makes me feel guilty. This is part of a mural that's in my house. I actually have been a muralist for years, and I have large scale building murals all over town. One is like an entire building that's like 2.5 stories. This is that building. It's huge. It took me, I want to say, like 180 hours to paint it, and it's got a lot of paint on it, like a lot. For my murals, I use a combination of latex and acrylic paint, and a lot of paint is plastic. So, a lot of guilt with creating those murals. So, yeah, the yarn and the paint, huge sources of microplastics, huge. So the guilt for creating art, it's a lot. And sometimes it makes me want to quit creating art completely because even when I make prints of like my paintings in order to ship them, shipping is an issue. If you put it in a plastic sleeve to protect it, that's an issue. And a lot of people are like, oh, well, my plastic sleeves are compostable. Are they backyard compostable? Are they industrial compostable? Do the folks that you're sending it to have a compost bin? Like, so does that work? I have these paper flowers behind me. They're made entirely out of reclaimed materials, electrical wire, reclaimed paper, no glue. I was trying to make art that didn't have any plastic, and they turned out beautiful and people love them. But the amount of time that it takes to make them means that they're kind of expensive. So I can't really make a living off of this because people don't have the money to buy them. And I'm not mad about that. I get it. Paper flowers, luxury item. Jewelry is a luxury item. Art, I think is a necessity, but it's a luxury item. Anyway, what does any of that have to do with why I use resin? So I use a bioresin, and it's really important for me to clarify, it is not biodegradable. I've seen resin companies that are like, it's a soy-based resin, and then they give you no other information about the resin. I saw people who were using that and they were like, yeah, you can even like pour this down your sink, which, oh my God, no, you cannot. Don't ever pour chemicals down your sink, down your drain. I mean, let's backtrack a little bit. I used to be a person that would wash my paintbrushes in the sink. Paint is plastic and it's a chemical, so I no longer do that. I rinse them in buckets of water. I let the water evaporate. It's a whole process and very time consuming. Anyway, I've been making jewelry for a very long time, and I used to attach things to other things with jeweler's glue, which is plastic. Now I do cleanups, and I take a lot of the trash that I find, and I do encase it in a resin. It is a bioresin, so it's plant-based rather than petroleum-based, so it has a lower footprint. I'm not trying to fool anybody. Resin is still a virgin plastic. It is still a new plastic, but it does have a lower footprint. The other thing that I do is the things that I put in my molds, I cut as tiny as I possibly can so that the resin is more of a binding agent rather than a feature. So I always want to make sure that over 50% of what is in the mold that's creating the piece of jewelry is reclaimed plastic. And so far, I think I've been pretty successful. Now, I also make jewelry that is out of entirely reclaimed plastic and then some new metal components. Those take a lot longer to make. And again, I can't make the price point cheap enough for a lot of people to be able to afford it. because I believe that people deserve a fair value for their labor, and that includes me. I deserve fair value for my labor. I deserve a living wage. So I try to balance that out. I try to make things that involve almost entirely reclaimed materials, and then I do these other things that have a little bit of resin in them. And I don't feel great about that, but I also know that this idea that environmentalists, or people who are, as I call myself, a sustainability enthusiast, this idea that we have to be perfect in our sustainability is not really fair or realistic. But I do love having these conversations. And if you want to continue it in the comment section, I would love that. And yeah, thanks for being here.